The sun hung low over the city, casting long shadows across the worn-out pavement. The flea market buzzed with life, vendors shouting, customers haggling, the scent of grilled food mixing with the faint staleness of old clothes and rusted trinkets. In the middle of it all, a boy sat on an overturned crate, his bony knees pulled up to his chest. Carl was only 10, but he had already learned what it meant to struggle. His mother, Lauren, had been sick for weeks, her cough growing worse, her body weaker. Medicine wasn't free, and money had run out long ago. Now, there was only one thing left to do, one choice he never thought he'd have to make. Beside him sat Max, his scruffy mutt with a white patch over one eye, happily gnawing. On a twig, a crooked cardboard sign rested against Carl's crate, the words written in shaky, uneven letters. Dog for sale. $25. Carl swallowed hard as he traced the letters with his eyes. Selling Max felt like giving away a piece of himself, but he had no other option. Every coin mattered. His mother needed help. People passed by without stopping. Some glanced at the sign and kept walking. Others smirked or shook their heads. No one wanted an old street dog, and maybe that was a good thing. Maybe Carl would get to keep him just a little longer. Then a shadow loomed over him, a tall man in a suit, his presence cutting through the noise like a blade. He didn't belong here. His polished shoes, his expensive watch, the way he carried himself with quiet authority. Carl squinted up at him, his heart hammering. "How much for the dog?" the man asked, his voice smooth but firm. Carl hesitated. $25, sir." A flicker of amusement crossed the man's face. 25? For this dog? He crouched down, studying Max with sharp, calculating eyes. Max, as if sensing something, stared back. His tail gave a slow, uncertain wag. "I'll give you 1,000, the man said, peeling crisp bills from his wallet. Carl's breath caught. $1,000? That was enough for medicine, food, maybe even rent. His hands shook as he reached for the money. "Okay," he whispered. The man snapped his fingers. "Come on, boy." Max stood, wagged his tail, but then froze. He turned to Carl, his ears flicking back. A low whine rose from his throat. He took a hesitant step forward, then stopped. His paws planted. Firmly, his dark eyes locked on Carl's face. The man frowned. "What's the problem?" Carl turned away, blinking fast. He just doesn't understand yet." But Max did understand, and he wasn't moving. Seconds stretched. The man exhaled, standing up straight. He studied the boy, the way his small shoulders trembled, the way his hands clenched around the bills like they might disappear. Then, to Carl's shock, the man pushed the money into his hands. "Keep him," he said. "Keep the money, too." Carl's head snapped up. What? You heard me." The man glanced down at Max once more, something unreadable in his eyes. Then he asked, "Where's your mother?" Carl hesitated, gripping Max's fur like an anchor. He didn't know who this man was or why he was helping, but something told him. This was only the beginning. Carl hesitated before answering, his fingers gripping Max's fur tightly. He had learned not to trust people, especially the ones who looked like they had everything. But the man wasn't walking away. His sharp blue eyes softened just a little, like he was waiting for something. Finally, Carl swallowed hard and mumbled, "She's home. She's sick." The man nodded, as if that was all he needed to hear. "Come on," he said, turning towards a sleek black car parked at the edge of the flea market. Carl hesitated. This felt too strange, too unreal. People like this man, rich, powerful, they didn't stop for kids like him. They didn't care about sick moms or old dogs. But he looked down at the money in his hand. $1,000. He thought of his mother's frail body, the way she struggled to breathe. If this man could help, maybe it was worth the risk. "Okay," Carl said quietly. Max stayed glued to his side as they followed the man to the car. The seats were soft, the air cool and clean. It smelled like leather and something expensive Carl couldn't name. The man slid behind the wheel, one hand resting easily on the steering wheel, the other drumming the dashboard like he was lost in thought. You got a name, kid? Carl. The man gave a small nod. Benjamin Saunders. Carl froze. He had heard that name before. His mother had whispered it once, talking about the people who ran the city, the ones who had more money than they could ever spend. Billionaire, businessman, ruthless. Carl's stomach twisted. What did a man like that want with a kid like him? They pulled up outside Carl's apartment building, a sagging, paint-chipped structure that smelled of mildew and old cooking oil. Inside, the air was heavy, too still. Carl rushed to his mother's, sighed, his heart pounding. Lauren lay on the couch, her face pale, her breath coming in short, uneven gasps. Her eyes fluttered open at the sound of footsteps. When she saw Benjamin standing in the doorway, her whole body tensed. Who? Her voice was barely above a whisper. He helped me, Mom, Carl said quickly. He gave us money. For medicine. Lauren's gaze flicked to Benjamin, wary, searching. She tried to sit up, but the effort sent her into a coughing fit. Benjamin watched for a moment, then pulled out his phone. Dr. Ellis, he said, his voice smooth and firm. St. Mary's. Now. Minutes later, a black car arrived. 2 men in suits stepped out, opening the door as if they had done this 100 times before. Carl's head spun. Everything was moving. Too fast! Take her! Benjamin ordered. Carl rode in the back with his mother, his fingers gripping hers. Max pressed against his side. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and something too clean, too cold. The doctors worked fast, machines beeped, nurses moved around them like ghosts. Hours passed before someone finally said, She's stable. Carl slumped in relief, his body sagging against the chair. Benjamin stood by the window, his gaze distant. Carl watched him, trying to understand why a man like that would do any of this. Why are you helping us? Carl finally asked. Benjamin was silent for a long time. Then he said, Your father. What happened to him? Carl's stomach clenched. He hated talking about it. He died in a car accident 2 years ago. Benjamin's jaw tightened. And you believe that? Carl blinked. What do you mean? Benjamin turned to face him, his expression unreadable. I don't think it was an accident. A strange coldness settled in Carl's chest. He had always carried guilt, always wondered if maybe his father wouldn't have been driving that night if Carl hadn't needed something, if he had been better, if he had done something different. But now, something darker loomed. Benjamin took a step closer, his voice quieter now, but heavy. I think someone wanted him gone. Carl's hands curled into fists. His heart pounded. Who? Benjamin hesitated for only a second before he said the name. And in that moment, everything changed. Carl's breath caught in his throat as Benjamin said the name, Victor Grayson. Even at 10 years old, Carl had heard it before. His father used to mention Grayson in hushed conversations with his mother, always with worry in his voice. But Carl had never understood why. Until now. He owned the company your father worked for, Benjamin continued, his voice steady but cold. And he made sure the truth about your dad's death was buried. Carl felt like the floor beneath him had disappeared. His father hadn't just died. He had been taken from them, left to be forgotten. How do you know this? Carl's voice was small but sharp. I have people who find the truth, Benjamin said simply. Your father wasn't the first to stand up against Grayson, but he might be the one who finally brings him down. Carl's mind raced. His father had always been a fighter, always standing up for what was right, even when it cost him. But this was bigger than anything Carl had imagined. Benjamin knelt in front of him, his piercing gaze meeting Carl's. I need you to be sure, he said. This fight, it's not easy. But if we do this, if we expose him, we can make sure he never hurts another family again. Carl clenched his fists. He had spent years feeling helpless, watching his mother struggle, believing that life was just unfair. But now he had a choice. I want to help, he said. Whatever it takes. Benjamin nodded. Then, we do this together. The next few weeks moved like a storm. Benjamin used his resources, lawyers, investigators, journalists, to bring the truth to light. Documents surfaced proving the cover-up. A whistleblower, a former employee who had been paid to keep quiet, finally spoke out. The media swarmed, and Grayson's perfect empire began to crack. Then, the final blow came. The court case. Carl sat in the courtroom beside Benjamin, his small hands gripping Max's fur tightly as the judge read the verdict. Victor Grayson, found guilty of corporate negligence leading to wrongful death. The words rang through the room, like a bell. Carl's chest tightened, emotion swelling in his throat. His father's name was finally cleared. Grayson's face was pale, his arrogance stripped away. For the first time, he looked small, powerless. Carl turned to Benjamin, unsure of what to say. But Benjamin simply placed a hand on his shoulder. "Your father would be proud," he said. 6 months later, the world looked different, brighter. Carl's mother was healthy again, running her own small diner, Max's Place, named after the dog, who had never left their side. The money from the settlement had given them a fresh start. The apartment was gone, replaced by a cozy home with warm lights and space for Max to run. Benjamin visited often, though he never said why. Maybe, Carl thought, he just liked being around them. Maybe family didn't have to be about blood. One evening, Carl sat across from Benjamin at the diner, watching him read the newspaper. Max lay beside them, his tail thumping softly. "Do you think he was really Rocky?" Carl asked, a small smile on his face. Benjamin looked down at Max, who lifted his head, ears perked. "Maybe," he said. "But I don't think it matters." Carl nodded. He understood. Max wasn't just a dog from the past. He was here, now, where he belonged. The bell above the door jingled as new customers walked in. The world kept moving forward, but this time, Carl was ready for it, and for the first time in a long time, everything felt right.